And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Still Curtain Podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com. And joining me, as always, is Still Curtain contributor Shayne Kubas. Shayne, we are coming off a 24-27 loss to the Colts in week 4. We couldn't keep that winning streak going. Would have been 4-0 entering this week. Came off a close. We're going to break down that game. We've got so much to talk about today, so I hope you're up for a longish show today. We're going to do Steelers Q1 grades. I know there's not really technically a quarter mark when you have a 17-game season, but we're going to throw in here right now. We'll talk some grades and have some fun with that. And then we're going to preview the Steelers Cowboys game. We also want to talk about the Davante Adams trade rumors coming up here because we know how hard the Steelers were pushing to get a wide receiver trade done. We knew what they had a deal on the table with Brandon Ayuk.
Yep.
And so I want to get your thoughts on that, Shayne. But first, let's start by just briefly talking about the Colts game. Before we go into a deeper dive with this, Steelers did not come out on top. Started off so flat in this game. Like, it's 17-point hole, it seemed like within seconds. They were down that many. Allowed 2 touchdown drives on the first 2 drives of the game. Offense couldn't get anything going. Defense didn't look like they showed up to play at all in this one until late in the second half. Like, what are your initial thoughts about this game, and are you concerned by it?
I think, unfortunately, this is the type of loss that we see this team have usually once or twice a year, right? Where they just don't have the right game plan going into it, or the players don't execute early on and we get into a hole. And especially the past few years when we don't have an elite quarterback, or at least a really good one, you can't really escape those holes, right? You can't get out of them. So this game was a little bit different because I do think, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the full scope of the game when we talk about it, but we did have a chance to still win this game, and a lot of it has to do with the quarterback play, so we'll get into that. But it's still one of those losses where, like, they just, again, like you said, they came out flat. They didn't do enough in the first half of the game to keep it close, and it was a bunch of bonehead mistakes and by players that you can't afford to get mistakes from. So,
yeah, and now Shane Steichen is 3-0 against the Steelers, dating back to his 2022 season as offensive coordinator of the Eagles. Scored 35 in that game, scored 30 against the Steelers last year when the Steelers played the Colts, and then nearly reached that mark again. Like, I don't know what it is, but he seems to be the kryptonite to Mike Tomlin. Tomlin can't figure out this RPO offense. He doesn't know how to stop those slants. His linebackers have reeked every time he's played Shane Steichen, and so that's just one of those matchups that I guess I should have factored that in maybe a little bit more, Shane, when I did my prediction. It's like, now we know, like, if these guys match up again, it's like, I'm gonna err on the side of caution probably.
I do wonder with Richardson going down, like, I know they were playing well on offense with him in there, but I think the inconsistencies from him as a passer probably would have led to some more drives that stalled, unlike with Flacco, where once Flacco came in, again, we saw this last year with the Browns. Like, he is a professional quarterback still, right? He's going to do the little things right. He's going to get the ball out of his hands quick. He's not going to turn the ball over a ton. And when he does, it's usually on, like, the deeper throws where he's trying to push it too far down the field. And they didn't ask him to do that in this game, right? They didn't need him to do that. So, and I think before we move on to it for later, but I'll talk more about this specifically once we get into that game breakdown. He just puts the linebackers in bad spots. Steichen does, like, especially for teams that are willing to play their linebackers on receivers too often, like we tend to do. He puts them in positions where they can't really win often, right? Like Queen, he's not going to cover downs in the slot. Wilson is as athletic as he's not going to cover downs in the slot. Like, he was just abusing those matchups, and I think ultimately that's what kind of did us in those third down situations, especially.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's been frustrating since going back to Keith Butler's defenses.
Yeah,
for the Steelers. You get those linebacker matchups. I remember the John Bostic game. Oh my goodness, trying to cover Keenan Allen on, like, the play of the game. Like, you have to have this stop. And Butler had John Bostic matchup against Keenan Allen. It wasn't that egregious, but it was still frustrating in week 4 for sure. And that's just something the Steelers are gonna have to deal with. It makes you wonder if they had a little bit more depth in the secondary. If maybe even like a Corey Trice was there, would they have tried to play more dime packages?
Maybe
get guys on the field that can cover, because, man, Patrick Queen, it's been some tough sledding so far in these first 4 weeks with Queen. He's had a few highlight moments, but a lot of rough plays mixed in there as well. The linebacker play, when you're going against a smart coordinator, they can exploit you, and that's exactly what Steichen did in this contest. Shayne, I want to talk about some roster moves here before we get to Davante Adams. James Daniels goes to IR. This sucks
It
because
does a lot.
Daniels was having a career year.
Mhm.
Everything that you wanted to be, what you wanted this guy to be when you signed him from the Bears, that's what he was. I mean,
Yeah.
coming off of his second or his first contract with Chicago into his second contract with the Steelers, he was still only 24 years old. So there was hope for this guy. This could be a potential long-term guard here with the Steelers. Now, obviously, a lot of people are pointing to the fact that he's going to make a lot of money, or at least was, and still should make a good sized contract, even with
Yeah.
Achilles injury. But he was playing his best football to date. I was really pleased with what I saw with him. You turn on the all 22 tape, you can see he was by far his best season as a run blocker. And I think that Arthur Smith's offense attributes to that a lot. So big blow to lose him. And now it's Daniels down for the season. It's Bawatanu down at least for the regular season. Nate Herbig was ruled out before the season even started. And so this line that was once so deep is now suddenly just decimated with injuries.
Yeah, I think it's really disappointing that the offensive line was one of the deeper positions on the team coming into the season, right? Like that was what the expectation was.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the Herbig injury immediately kind of takes a blow to that. Now Frazier's been unbelievable, so it's good that he's playing because there's a chance he might not have been initially, right? Like there's a chance of that. So we don't have to worry about that issue where Tomlin's like, I'm not going to put the rookie out there even though he's better. But everything else, like the Daniels injuries, Simalo missing time, like there's benefits of like, okay, you got to see some of the younger players, but Daniels is technically a younger player still, like you said, right? He's not this like veteran that we want to jettison or anything like that. Like he's somebody you want to be a foundational piece of the offense if you can. Now you're not going to get to see him the rest of the year. It kind of clouds his future. Does this allow them to maybe re-sign him at a cheaper rate? I know it kind of seemed like they weren't interested in doing that for some reason, but maybe that will change with how he played in this offense before he got hurt. But again, it's just the offensive line now is so much of a I think it can still be good, but they cannot afford to lose anyone else.
Yeah.
Like anyone else goes down, you're immediately playing practice squad level guys, and it's not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Shayne, I heard interesting arguments that the Steelers' offensive line right now, their starting five at least, isn't maybe not worse than what it was at the beginning of the season. But now you're swapping, instead of having Spencer Anderson and James Daniels play, you're going to have Isaac Seumalo and probably Mason McCormick play at guard. So I guess at least since then, if you look at it in that light, they can get by with what they had. Their tackles are the same. Their center, a rookie center, obviously has played really well, Zach Frazier. But the depth now is so concerning at this point where you can't lose an interior guy. You can't lose a tackle. Things will get really bad if you do at this point. And so Max Sharping was one of the guys that they signed this week to fill that void of James Daniels, played some guard, played some tackle. Also, Aaron Shampkin was promoted to the active roster for the Steelers. Shampkin played this past week. I thought he did a pretty good job overall, but I think it's a little bit concerning because it probably speaks to the health of Jaylen Warren and Cordarrelle Patterson going into week 5.
Yeah, I assume at least one of them is not going to play, if not both. Probably Warren, if I had to guess, is at least going to suit up. They probably will try not to use him too much, similar to week 1 where they didn't really play him very much, even though he was active, and then let Harrison Champlin kind of take the load for that game, which against the Cowboys might be doable. I know they had a great game against the Giants run offense, but Singletary is kind of a very much boomer bust player in the sense that when he can make a move and get open space, he's good, but trying to break tackles or do anything like that is not exactly a strong suit. So that might be enough in this game coming up, but yeah, they desperately need to have at least one of those guys fully healthy to pair with Najee, if not both of them.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll talk about some of those matchups later on in the show. The other thing that I wanted to note here, Shayne, 2 guys getting cut from the Steelers, safety Jalen Elliott and cornerback Darius Rush. Elliott doesn't surprise me at all because of the Edmonds signing. I'd rather have Edmonds on the roster anyway. The familiarity with the team, the athleticism. Heck, move Edmonds down into the box. You're having trouble with coverage. I know Edmonds isn't the best coverage guy, but he can play some box linebacker for you when you're in nickel and dime. And so maybe that's an option for them. Elliott didn't surprise me, but Darius Rush, I'm a little bit disappointed that this experiment didn't work out. I mean, you had a 6'3" corner from the SEC who ran a 4.36. Like I'm always willing to take gambles on these types of players. And at the very least, I thought maybe he could be that gunner for them. He's got that speed and size on the outside to contribute on special teams and maybe be a depth cornerback. Just didn't work out for him. And I think at this point, Shayne, when a cornerback that's this young and this athletic, who should be that good, has been with 3 different teams already, the chances of him working out in the league are just very slim at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah, as much as the talent is there, clearly he just hasn't put it together as a football player in the NFL. And ultimately, I feel like if, again, like you said, if he's failed on this many teams, especially this many good organizations overall, because you think about who he's played for in his career, it's probably not going to happen for him. So.
Yeah. Unfortunate stuff there. And especially knowing that Corey Trice is on IR, your secondary depth is all of a sudden pretty thin. You're good at safety, but your corner depth is very thin. They can't afford any injuries to that position right now. Let's talk about Davante Adams here, Shayne. I know this is a big topic. It's probably what everybody wants to hear about. We're not going to spend our whole time talking about Adams here, but I do think that it's worthwhile to note that the Steelers have reportedly expressed interest in at least reaching out to the Raiders to see what the asking price would be for Davante Adams. Obviously, we know they had a trade on the table for Brandon Ayuk. The 49ers pulled the rug out from under them. He obviously went back and signed with San Francisco. Davante Adams is a more established receiver than Brandon Ayuk, probably a more polished receiver than Brandon Ayuk. He's still really good. I know he's 32 years old. He's still a really good football player. Offers a lot of value to the team. I mean, he's a big reason why the Raiders were able to beat the Ravens. I think it was in week 2, caught 9 of 12 targets for 110 yards and a touchdown, I believe, in that game. So he's still a really good football player. The question becomes with the contract and with the draft capital, how much do you need to give up? I think there's a time and place for everything, Shayne. And I think watching how Justin Fields has performed in the first month of the season, and knowing that, man, maybe you are just a receiver away, seeing like how the Kansas City Chiefs have struggled. The Bills just got their butt beats by the Ravens just this week. And so you think that maybe the AFC is wide open. Maybe this is the first time in a while the AFC is wide open. It's not a scenario like last year where it's like you could watch this Matt Canada, Kenny Pickett-led offense, like this thing's got no chance to go anywhere. You can see the potential with the Steelers, and it makes you wonder if your receiver pairing goes from Pickens and Calvin Austin or Pickens and Van Jefferson all of a sudden to Pickens and Davante Adams. It's like, wow, talk about an improvement there. I think that's the most stark improvement you can have basically anywhere around the league. And so what would you think about a Davante Adams trade? What would you be willing to give up? What would be like your maximum cutoff line?
I think that the trade makes a lot of sense for the Steelers for sure. I think that of the teams that would be interested in him and it would make sense, I think they're pretty high on that list. Everyone talks about the Jets because obviously, first of all, they scored 9 points against the Broncos and lost. Not ideal. When you don't perform as well as the Steelers did against the Broncos, not great if you're the Jets. That's obviously a number 1 spot probably for them. You look at teams like the Cowboys who just lost Brandon Cooks. Actually, we're talking about we'll be talking about them here soon for our game this week. Like, there's a lot of teams that could use Davante Adams. I think the problem for the Steelers ultimately is, are they going to be willing to give up as much as some other teams, right? Because as much as we think we're desperate for a receiver, does the team think they're that desperate for a receiver? Because obviously the Ayuk trade situation kind of made everybody think that they understand that, but they haven't done anything else since then to try to address it. And you don't have to go after a Davante Adams level player to address it, but they haven't gone after anyone to address it, right? So I think it just comes down to, will the Raiders be willing to move off of a second-round pick? Because I don't think they're going to get a second-round pick from anyone. I could see maybe a Chiefs team doing that because they're so bad at receiver right now, even when everyone's kind of healthy. Like, Brown's not going to be back for them. Rice may have avoided an ACL from what I've heard, but he's going to be missing some amount of time. But if no one's willing to offer a third-round pick and probably a throw-in or maybe a player or something like that, I'd be more than willing to do that. But I will say, and I'll talk about this later, I do not think that they will do that.
All right, Shayne, good to hear. I think they would like to. Now, here's the thing: you have to go to a competitor. Like it makes no sense otherwise for a team trying to rebuild. If you don't think that you have a chance to make a run this year, it makes no sense because Davante Adams is an older receiver. This could be a 1-year rental, really. When you look at the contract, the cap number that you would absorb this year, very reasonable. I think if you got him like right now, based on base salary, it'd be like $13 million, and you can absolutely stomach that.
Yeah.
The problem is in 2025, that goes up to 35.6 million, and it goes up to 36.6 million in 2026. Like, those are some massive base salaries. You would either have to say, this is a 1-year rental for us, and we're going to get out of this contract after the season, which the good thing is guaranteeds are paid, so you can get out of it for nothing, but it's still going to cost you draft capital. And you still, you have to ask yourself, is it worth doing that? The second option would be, if you traded for Davante Adams, you'd have to find a way to give him a contract extension that's going to work out for you. Is it going to be one where you have to tack on voidable years to move some of those just lofty numbers around? How could you make that work? Could you give him enough in guaranteed money to kind of lower the base salary per year a little bit, backload the contract? I mean, I'd imagine it would look something like that, knowing how the Steelers do business, probably try to tack on a few extra years to that, backload that contract and give themselves a little bit of a window there. But he has to go to a competitor. You're not trading a quarter of the way through the season. You're not trading for a 32-year-old receiver with a bad contract over the next 2 years, unless you think that you are competing. And so, and Shayne, I feel like the Steelers, I didn't think so at the beginning of the season, but knowing that Justin Fields has played, watching him play and seeing what he's been able to do with basically Pickens and nobody, I think if you were able to get one more legitimate bona fide option in there, like Adams, I think that could give you that next bump where you could go from being a borderline contender to now you are a legitimate contender. I can have Adams run all my intermediate stuff. He will kill defenses on post and corner routes, and I can have Pickens stretch the field. You'll always have to stay accountable for him. You won't be able to double Pickens like you have been. And so just the intrigue with this is so huge to me. Kind of like the Ayuk situation, except I think you're going to have to give up less draft capital, because knowing the contract situation that you're going to have, knowing his age plays a factor right now. Yes, you can get him very reasonably priced for this year. I would be really surprised if it's a second-round pick. I think I would at this point. I think it's going to have to be a team
something
like it would have to be like the Chiefs, who is just absolutely desperate to salvage this season and to make sure that you are a Super Bowl contender still. But I think a third plus, and Shayne, if you're asking me, third plus, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it at this point, because
I'm willing to do it. Yeah, if I'm not.
There are certain times you have to capitalize on windows, and I think this is an ideal opportunity to make sure that Justin Fields doesn't fail and that you're giving him every available option. You think of the short straw that Fields has drawn already with 3 offensive linemen done for the season, and now having no number 2 receiver to throw to at all, at least no reliable option in the passing game. Like, I'm intrigued by this if the price is right.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about it too is with Adams, I think the contract is not really a problem for me, because I do think they'll just rework it if they do want to keep him beyond this year. And I do think that anyone who trades for him should try to at least get a couple years out of him, obviously, if they can. And whether it's voidable years, whether it's an extension that moves money around, whether it's like a guaranteed salary that they pay up front, like you said, that helps the cap hit come down for the first couple of years of it, whatever it may be. I think that's what you want to do with him if you trade for him, regardless of who that is trading for him, right? And if the Steelers do that, again, I think the ultimate point here is Fields has proven to us through 4 games that he's a different player. Now, how much different and how much better he is, we won't know until probably the end of the season, truly. But he's a different player than he was in Chicago. And I think if you give him a receiver that does run impeccable routes, is going to be where he wants to be. Like, he will hit them this year. Like, he's shown, like, if he's the first read, if he is open, he's going to hit him on time. He's going to play within rhythm. Like, you can run an offense that Adams is going to be good in with Fields at quarterback, and I wouldn't have said that coming into the year, right? So it changes things. Like, the Steelers have to change how they do business, in my opinion, based off of how they've started with Fields so far.
Mm-hmm. And I think it opens up the running game more too. You have to stay accountable for 2 legitimate wide receivers, and so you're not going to want to get beat deep. And so I think it's going to open everything up for the offense if they were to do that. Steelers, I think, are top 6 in odds to land Davante Adams. We'll see how things unfold between now and our show next week, and maybe this is something that we're still talking about, Shayne, as the trade deadline approaches. And we've got just over a month to that. I think November 4th is the trade deadline, if I recall off the top of my head this year. So we're about a month away from that. All right. It's the greatest time of the year again. Football is back, and it's here to stay till February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. I love Underdog because it's easy and fast to get started and play. This is the added level of entertainment I've been looking for. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is easy. Just go over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code StillCurtain, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code StillCurtain to claim your new customer special of a free pick in your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467369. All right. And as you are joining us here in the live chat, be sure to drop your questions for Shayne and I. We would love to be able to get to those today. We do have a long show, but we always love answering your questions and having a little back and forth discussion here. All right, Shayne, let's jump into our notes from the Steelers versus Colts in week 4. We brushed on it pretty briefly at the beginning here, so let's do a little bit deeper dive. We're going to go offense, defense, special teams. What did you notice here? We'll start with the offensive side of the ball, and let's start with quarterback Justin Fields. I know the first half was a little bit discouraging, just seeing how things were unfolding. Obviously, nothing was going right, offense or defense. They couldn't sustain drives offensively. Things obviously clicked in the second half. Now, I know part of that is Indy's game plan change. When you have a multi-score lead, you tend to back up a little bit. They gave Fields way too much breathing room. And in my opinion, Shayne, I really genuinely believe that if they didn't have the botched snap at the end of the game, I think the Steelers were winning that football game. Like, they had all of the momentum going in their favor. Fields had 3 second half touchdowns, including the rushing score, or 2 rushing scores, the passing score. I mean, he was just good. He was really, really good in the second half of this game, whether it was game plan or otherwise. What did you think? If you had to give Fields a grade for his performance this week, and is this the best that you've seen Fields play in his career?
I think best, because I haven't watched all of his time in Chicago, it's hard to say that it's the best. But I think this is the best example of a player who, in the past, when he's had to come back, right, and he's had to do it a lot in Chicago, tried to come back. It wasn't successful often because he would kind of melt down, right? His bad habits would take over. He would hold on to the football. And there was a bad moment with the fumble where, like, yeah, you don't want to fumble the football in the situation. But outside of that, I mean, it's really hard to critique anything he did from the time the second half kicked off to the end of the game. Like, he was phenomenal down the stretch of that game. And yeah, they were backing off a little bit. I don't know why they were, because clearly after that the first touchdown drive they had, like, I would have been like, all right, we got to lock back in here, guys, because he figured something out, and he just kept figuring them out consistently. I mean, the throw on the run to Pickens was great. Like, the scramble drill play, like, all everything was working for him in the second half. An overall grade, I'd still have to give him a B, just because the first half was not great, and the fumble was a big play in the game. But in general, his teammates let him down far more often than he let them down in this game. And that's why, despite this being a loss that you really don't want to have against a team that was kind of reeling for most of the first 3 games, it's much more of a positive loss than you normally see from the Steelers when they lose games like this.
Yeah, I think I would give him a B+, Shayne, if I'm just putting a letter grade to it. And I think and I agree with you that the first half was very unspectacular, but nobody showed up to play football.
Yeah,
the defense didn't wake up until like the third quarter. And so I feel bad, because I think that Fields was legitimately one of the only guys that showed up to play here. And when your quarterback is the guy that shows up, it's hard if nothing else is working around you. I think statistically, there's nothing more that you want to see from this game than what you did. The cherry on the top obviously would have been if you were able to mount that comeback and you were able to get that touchdown drive, or at least the field goal drive to send it into overtime right there. And I really think that they would have gotten at least the field goal out of that, how easily they were moving the ball on the field. The second half performance was so encouraging, I think. And when you look at Fields' stat line at the end of the game when he has 312 passing yards and 50 rushing yards, and became the first player in Pittsburgh Steelers history to have 300 plus passing yards, 50 plus rushing yards, and 3 touchdowns in a game. And so knowing that he's capable of putting up these numbers, he's capable of putting the ball into the end zone like we haven't seen since Ben Roethlisberger was here. Low bar, but we still haven't seen it. And so it's encouraging to note, I think, just seeing what he did in this contest overall. It makes me wonder, had everybody else not come out, including Fields, not come out so flat in this game, if they could have ended up racking up the score. I want to see, I think this is an encouraging sign, though, to see, yeah, you are capable of doing it. When the pressure's on, obviously you have to come away with the win, but you're able to put up a lot of points really quickly because Fields has just been so good with his passes down the field this year. And so that's something that he's always been pretty good at, extending the play with his legs. I think there's a lot to be encouraged by there for sure. Shayne, what about anybody else on offense that you want to highlight, good or bad, from this game?
I mean, George had a customary great day that is also marred by weird stuff, right?
Yeah,
like the fumble.
He did.
That's one of those fumbles you can't do that. I'm sorry. You can't put the ball out there like that with one.
You already had the first down. You're at the 4-yard line. You got to live to fight another down there.
He sometimes he does stuff that's man, do you know where you're at on the field? Do you know the situation? And as great as he is, he's so phenomenal as a receiver in so many ways. But this, again, some of the mental stuff with him needs to definitely continue to get better. He obviously was a big part of the offense. I thought that the running game was truly horrendous outside of a couple Patterson runs, and I'll get to why that is, and I think why the numbers on that are truly just they were as bad as they should have been based on how they were blocking the Colts front, and I'll talk about that later. But again, Fields had to do it himself for the most part in this game a lot, especially as a runner. Outside of his rushing ability and like I said, a couple carries from Patterson, just wasn't our day on the ground, and I really wish they would have gone away from it sooner than they did.
Yeah, I agree. That Pickens can't fumble in that situation. I know these type of things happen from time to time. He's trying to, they didn't have much going on offense. He was trying to make a play there, and it makes you wonder what the outcome of that game potentially could have been had that not happened. That's a big swing right there, losing out on what should have been a touchdown. You're that close to the goal line.
Yeah, or at least a field goal, which would
at the very least a field goal, and maybe that would have been enough to at least knock the game up eventually when the time ticked down. Going back to that first fumble, wasn't the first fumble, but the one at the end of the game, everybody kind of shared the blame for that. Mason McCormick, he was responsible for tapping Zach Frazier so that Frazier has the cadence, knowing when to snap the ball. Yeah. Fields was looking the other way, making sure his receiver aligned. And so I think it was truly a joint effort. Having said that, they've got to get these botched snap situations under control, whether it's from shotgun, under center. You just can't have these. That's the difference in potentially winning a game right there. And you could see it. That sucked all the momentum out of the drive. You take a 12-yard loss on first down. Now the clock is running because you just got sacked down there, and the time is ticking on the play and to come back and get back in field goal range. So that killed everything. It killed all the momentum that they had going into that very last drive there. So they have to figure that out for sure. If you're interested, I did get a chance to grind some tape, and I cut up every run of Najee Harris in week 4. You can see for yourself. You can be the judge. I think there wasn't a lot of running room, Shayne, obviously. But I still think Najee has to do 2 things well that he just can't do. He's not that explosive, and you got to get skinny between some holes to make some plays. And he just doesn't have that ability to do either one of those things. You can go watch the tape for yourself. I cut it up on Twitter here. And so it's just been a very underwhelming, I think, start to the season for Najee. He had some nice plays in the passing game, a 32-yard reception, catch and run there. And I thought that was kind of the highlight of the offense for the Steelers, was getting explosive plays in the passing game. And all of them came in the second half. Pickens had a 38-yarder. Freiermuth had a 29-yarder. Harris had a 32-yarder. Washington even had the 20-yard catch and run in this game. So 4 different receivers had explosive plays. We would love to see that more often. We'd love to see that consistently. Box score wise, it's everything that you would want normally. Pickens is the guy with the 100-yard game. Pat Freiermuth chipped in 5 catches for 57 and a touchdown. Najee Harris had 54 yards in the receiving game. And so everybody's getting involved. It's just it came too little, too late. You have to be able to turn it on sooner than that.
Yeah, and I'll talk about, because I also watched every snap that Harris had as a rusher in that game multiple times over, and all I'll say now, and I'll talk about a little bit later, is I don't think that you could watch those runs and watch Patterson's runs and think that there's two different football teams running the football, and not so much on the backs, as more so the blocking in those situations, is my opinion. But we'll get to that later.
Okay. All right, good to know. Shayne, let's talk about the defensive side of the ball here, unless you had anything else for offense.
No.
I mean, by far the worst performance of the season. That goes without saying. Anytime you give up 17 points early in the game like that, you are putting your offense in such a hole. And here's the thing is, we knew that when we signed Arthur Smith, he is not the type of offensive coordinator that is going to dig you out from 3-score deficits. That's just not what he does. He doesn't have the firepower in his arsenal, in the passing concepts to do that for you. It's remarkable the Steelers got as close as they did in this game, honestly.
Really,
because
it is.
This team is built to play with a lead or to play within a score. They're not built when they go down to be able to fight back. And so it's surprising that they were at least able to do it as well as they did. The defense deserves a ton of blame here. And I think you could just pass it all around. Joey Porter, worst game of your career, man. It was rough. It was really, really rough. And so that one was a little bit concerning to me. I don't think he's going to repeat this, but we look at Porter early in the season, he's been sloppy. I mean, there's been a lot of penalties, a lot of grabbiness. I remember the play against Cortland Sutton where he's tugging, as remarkable as didn't rip his jersey off, and the guy still hits a post route and takes it for a while. And so he's got to clean up this game, and he's got to do it really fast, because we're going to talk about his potential matchup coming in here this week. Could be a nightmare for him if that's how the Steelers decide to use him. But that was a really ugly performance by Porter. We've had missed tackles. We've had penalties. I thought that Patrick Queen, I mean, man, you watch this guy, if you turn on the tape and see just some of his angles and the way that he over pursues at times, like, you have to, I want you to be aggressive as a linebacker. I do not want you standing on your heels like Miles Jack and Devin Bush, wait for the play for you to come to you 8 to 10 yards down the field. I want you to be aggressive and attack the play. But you also know you need to break down, because it resulted in some big runs from Jonathan Taylor at times in this game when he didn't, just over pursued, fly right past the ball carrier, and then he takes off for a big carry. And so not impressed with his play. Peyton Wilson got beat on a couple of those plays. Yeah, I noticed a couple of times this year has been beat on that whip route. He bites a little bit on that.
It's hard for
he's a rookie. He's a third-round rookie. But overall, just not a good performance. I thought Hayward played well, like he always does, just at least a stout run defender. And Deshaun Elliott's been awesome. I mean, this guy has been so good that he was one of the lone bright spots on defense. And I thought that TJ Watt had a really quiet game. I know that you're doubling with the chip. You're getting that chip. And we saw last week, PFF put out their chip percentage. Watt was the highest in the league, doubled the next highest person.
Which is hilarious,
But I would like, even though you're getting chipped, I still would like to see you get a little bit more out of that. He had a couple nice rushes that came really close to being potential sacks. He always gets a few of them per game, no matter what. But yeah, I'd like to see his impact be a little bit stronger. It makes me wonder if because he was drawing the attention again, and everybody was kind of just playing sluggish. Like it almost looked like guys were kind of taking plays off. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but the preparedness in this game was just bad, Shayne.
Yeah, the defense was just overmatched early on. And I think that Richardson hits that big pass to kick things off, and it all kind of snowballed from there, right?
Yeah, it did.
Porter almost gets to it, but he's in front of the ball. Like, he's not close enough to the receiver to make a play. And again, Richardson, before he goes down, was running the football well. They were running the football really well. And I'm going to keep talking about this guy. I hate that I'm going to keep doing it, because I said it when they signed him. Patrick Queen has just been tremendously awful. And I did not want that to be the case, but to me, it just was very clear that, like, he was not going to be the same effectiveness as a player in the Steelers uniform, because we don't have Roquan Smith next to him. We don't have somebody that can take a lot off of his plate and ask him just to do the things that he does well. And again, is that really his fault? No, because I think the team should have known that. Any team signing him should have understood that was probably the case. Now you hope that he's learned enough where he's going to be a good player, at least still, So far, not so much. Not been a good player really in any aspect of the game. Even as a blitzer, which is something he's always been good at, hasn't really been that effective at that this year. It's just kind of brutal watching him try to play linebacker right now. And obviously, Wilson's rookie. You don't know how much you're going to get out of him throughout the year. Roberts is still probably their best linebacker realistically, like on a down-to-down basis. Just doesn't have the coverage ability with his speed. So all I'm saying is I would love if Cole Holcomb could show up at some point and kind of settle things down a little bit. But unfortunately, I'm not sure if I can expect that to happen. So.
Yeah, Shayne, I was skeptical of the Patrick Queen signing, but I was more optimistic than you, and things have gone every bit as bad as you could have imagined, even.
Yeah, I think so.
You were not a fan of the signing at all. I don't think that there's many contracts out there that it's a worse way to spend 13 mil per year than Patrick Queen right now. Like it's been really bad. I think that you can get that type of play out of almost anybody. My goodness, and looking at the way that like if Robert Spillane is playing right now, it's like you could just kept that guy. Yeah. It wasn't great on the Steelers, but he seems to make some plays on the Raiders occasionally. So it's if you're spending that much money on an off-ball linebacker that is maybe bottom 3-ish position in terms of importance minus special teams
right now,
you got to make sure that player is good. And so far that player has not been good. And it's unfortunate. Yes, he's had some highlight moments, and I think those highlight moments are tricking people into thinking that he's been good for the Steelers. He has not been good. And so if you go back and watch the All-22 tape, it's very evident that the amount of plays that he misses is 4 times the amount of the plays that he makes. And so that ratio just needs to go way down. You talked about Holcomb. I'm hoping that Holcomb can return from that knee injury at some point here soon and relieve Patrick Queen from green dot duties. Like the one thing that I just don't understand, Shayne, and I just don't, I know that it's because of your investment. It's you're spending a lot of money on Queen, but the snap distribution between Queen, Roberts, and Peyton Wilson has been very poor. Like Queen is getting exponentially higher snaps than what the other linebackers are, and it's not been warranted. And so I would like to see that split almost be an even split between the 3 of them, and then go from there and see, all right, which one of you guys is going to be proved to be that dog that can stay out there and be our 3-down linebacker, because Queen is struggling right now. And I think that you kind of need to put the pressure on him, investment or not. You need to make him prove that he should be out there on the field. Anybody else you want to highlight, Shayne, on defense here?
I did just want to mention, like, again, I know that invoking this name is not great for Steelers typically, although they're starting to come around, I think, a little bit in a lot of ways, PFF. But Patrick Queen, from their grading at least, is having his worst season as a tackler and a run defender since his rookie season. And his overall defensive grade is easily the worst of his career outside of his rookie season. He's missing over 20% of his tackles. He's on pace for, I believe, 52 solos, like around 56 or so solo tackles when he's been closer to 100 typically. He's just not getting involved in the game nearly as much as he has in the past, even in good or bad ways, right? He just is kind of not really being involved at all in a lot of cases. And the defense clearly is hurting from that in a lot of ways, right? Especially for teams that can get to the second level with their running game, because, when Cam Hayward blows up 2 guys and TJ Watt screams off the edge, and Highsmith, when he was out there, could also set an edge. Like, the linebacker play didn't matter as often in run defense because guys weren't getting there very often, right? Or if they were, it was only after being slowed down by a lot by the front 4. But right now, that's not happening, and you're seeing when they have to tackle in space. Not happening right now.
It's been rough. So hopefully that starts to improve here. To give Queen at least the benefit of the doubt, I know that he's played in the NFL for a while now. I mean, we're talking year 5. He did just turn 25 years old. He's still a very young player. He's 20 years old when he came out. But you got to show it at some point. And he did reach his peak.
If anything.
He did. Well, and that's what we wondered, right? That's what you brought up so many times, playing with Roquan Smith and that Ravens defense last year, not having to have the green dot responsibilities, and now all of a sudden being thrust into a bigger, more important role with the Steelers. We did wonder if he was going to regress, and he certainly has since last season. Maybe the fit is bad. It's just I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that things can improve and get better from here.
I mean, they can't get.
It does make me wonder. No, they can't. It's been really rough. If Holcomb comes back, let's say Holcomb comes back and he proves to be healthy and he picks up kind of where he left off before. Man, splitting snaps between those 4 linebackers. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do there. I can't imagine that that Tomlin and Terrell Austin can watch Patrick Queen and say, this guy is deserving of still getting 2 to 3 times as many snaps as my other linebackers. Like, I think you're going to look at a way more even split. I wonder who your guys would be. Do your third down linebackers, are they now Peyton Wilson and Cole Holcomb? Like, what gives you the best combination there? Because I think that kind of just watching Queen, even in coverage, like, he feels like he should be like a 2 down, just like run and chase, get after the quarterback type of off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, and again, it's frustrating because, like, he has all the athletic tools to be a great coverage defender. He just does not have feel for it. He simply does not have the coverage instincts. He's not a guy that covers players. He covers space. And the problem is, when you're covering space, once a player enters that space, you have to anticipate that. Like, so many of the best coverage linebackers in the league, like, yeah, they're never going to be like super productive in terms of pass breakups or interceptions, usually, like, outside of like Fred Warner. Basically, that's pretty much the only guy that is consistently like productive in that way. But outside of him, like, you have to affect plays. You have to make quarterbacks second guess throwing into that window because you might appear there, right? Like, and with right now, like, they know if they run a crossing pattern behind him, he's not going to feel it and run with it. He's going to let it go behind. Like, it's just not hard to pick on him in coverage right now, despite his athletic gifts. So,
yeah, and the way that he's playing right now, it reminds me of Devin White. Not good Devin White, but bad Devin White, where you are still fast. You can see that on tape, but you kind of don't know where you're going at times, and you're just running.
The field just isn't there. Yeah, and that's hard to develop. It is. He's young enough where he still could eventually. I don't know if he all of a sudden does it in the middle of the season.
Which, again, give me the aggressiveness over a guy who is just sitting on his heels waiting for the play to come. Because at least at times I've seen Queen, when he knifes in there or gets really aggressive pursuing a play,
he will have good games and good plays. Like, he will impact the game.
Oftentimes, Shayne, it'll make the ball carrier change direction and somebody else cleans up. And so some of those you can count as missed tackles. Some of them you can just say, all right, well, his aggressiveness helped cause that play. So I do want to give him credit for those type of things, but yeah, not good overall. Deshaun Elliott's been the opposite. It's been very impressive so far. So as bad as the Queen signing has been, I think they almost made up for it with how stinking good Elliott has been in the early game. Like, run defense, coverage, like, he's been everywhere. Everything that you want him to be right now, he's been that guy. So let's move to special teams here because we still have a lot to talk about. And Shayne, I want to talk about Calvin Austin in that punt return in the second half.
What a play.
What a play. What a spark for the Steelers. I mean, Austin, he pulled the Matrix out there after fielding the punt. Looks like he's going to get his head taken off. Kind of goes down, like back bend, hand on the ground, shoots himself back up, and then immediately just bursts for a huge gain. Like, that's impressive stuff. That's what you want to see from your punt returner. I have no questions about him as a punt returner. Even fielding one of those punts over the shoulder. Like, I've just been so confident.
Yeah.
And we've not had this confidence in a long time. Remember dealing with Gunnar Olszewski and some of the other guys we've had in recent years. Austin has just such a natural feel for punt return duties that I just feel very, very confident with him back there.
Yeah, I do too. And honestly, it makes me sad though too, because I'm like, man, look what he does in open space, guys. Can we figure something out here? Like, can we throw a couple crossers? Like, can we get something going in space with him? It's frustrating sometimes though too, because you're like, again, you see him, you're like, oh wow, like look at this, look at him in the open field. Other guys in the league, you're able to get them the ball in some ways, right? Like, and he's obviously had the big game against Chargers. Like, he's done things, but you got to, if you don't trade for Davante Adams, you have to figure out a way to get this guy going. Because, like, who else is making plays for this football team on offense as a receiver outside of Pickens and Freiermuth in some games? Like, it just isn't going to happen probably unless it's him. You hope Wilson maybe, but again, he has like a month to catch up apparently before they're willing to play him, which is a whole other thing that I don't want to even talk about right now. But whatever. If it's not going to be Wilson or Austin, it's not going to be anybody, guys. I'm sorry. So I don't know.
I understand that it takes a while for rookies to get going, but man, I've never seen a team like to play rookies less when they don't have to, but you do have to. That's the thing. It's like your other options are pitiful right now in the passing game. But you talk about Austin, Shayne. I don't care if you have to engineer touches for the guy at this point.
That's what I'm saying. Like, hand him the ball in the backfield, throw him
give him a couple touches, get him on a drag route. Like, this is the type of stuff we talked about. You could see against the Chargers when Fields hit him with the rock, he took it the rest of the way. He's got the juice, the explosion to do that. 4.2 or 4.32 speed, an 11.6 broad jump. Like, this guy is really, really explosive. And so give him at least a few opportunities a game where he can get in some space and see what can happen. Explosive plays can help you win football games. And so I think he can offer those. Just the Steelers haven't been trying him. And so
you want to run that stupid, you want to run that stupid toss play, throw it to him. I don't care. I'd rather watch him do it than Najee or even the running backs.
Yes.
Like,
I mean,
like at least something.
Man,
I don't know.
It's frustrating. It's all frustrating. All right. If you are a fan of Pittsburgh Steelers and would like to support the Still Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Still Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. I realize I spelled my name wrong on my Twitter @ right here. So that's
there's an A
in there, but that's all right. Shayne, I want to do our first quarter review, and we'll do a couple fun little exercises here. Let's start off with some positional grades for the Steelers in Q1. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this because we spend time breaking down each position every week. So let's just kind of hammer through these. Just the grade that comes to the top of your head. We didn't rehearse this at all beforehand, but let's start with quarterback. And what would you give Justin Fields for the quarterback grade a quarter of the way through the season?
Just to make sure. So I want to make sure, is it grades, or are we giving a positional ranking in the league based on where
these ones? Let's do a grade. Let's do letter grade. And then we're going to do a ranking next in our next.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay. So I'd say with where this Fields is done right now, it's a very solid B overall, because a little bit slow starting in some games and they figure it out. But again, I would have told you it probably would have been a C before the season if you played, because I expected a lot more variance there. It's really been the opposite of, like, I know what I'm getting from him almost every time he drops back this year, which, again, if you had told me that before the season, I would have been like, how they managed to do that with this offense. So yeah, I'd definitely give him a solid B there.
Yep, give me a B as well for the quarterback position. Obviously, we didn't even know Fields was going to be starting at the beginning of the year.
We didn't think
I could have seen this going much worse than it has. Fields has been encouraging, even if the Steelers are only scoring 18 points and change per game so far. I think that's going to improve in time. So I'll do a B on that as well. Shayne, what about the running backs?
I'll say a C, because Warren has missed a lot of time. Patterson hasn't done a ton in terms of like volume, so he's been productive when given the ball, but not a ton of volume. And Najee, like we talked about, like a combination of his skill set not meshing super well, and then also just the run blocking has been kind of poor a lot of the time, in my opinion. And overall, like, we've had some standout games from Daniels and such, but the run game in general and the running backs, I'd say like a C.
Shayne, I'm going to go lower. I'm going to go D+. And the reason why is because I think if you take Justin Fields out of the running game, you just look at the running backs.
That's fair. Yeah.
It's not been very good. I mean, really, we've got a handful of carries this whole season. I think one explosive play from Najee and a couple nice runs from Cordero Patterson. Other than that, and Warren has been obviously a non-factor. He's barely touched the ball because he's got the hamstring and the knee injury. So I just think overall it's been very underwhelming. If you take Fields' stats out of the rushing attack looks very poor right now. And that's what Arthur Smith's game is predicated on. So it's got to improve for sure.
I think it will. Obviously, it's hard to get worse.
Yeah. It's going to get better from here. I think we'll see that trend as the season marches on here. What about a grade for the wide receivers, Shayne?
I'm going to give him a C, only because Pickens is really good and the others have been not really targeted that much. So it's really hard for me to say that they're truly that they've played bad. It's just they're not getting involved at all, right? Like, it's kind of one of those weird things where, like, it's hard for me to judge many of these guys when they don't simply touch the football, right? Like, Austin has been good when given the ball, so, like, I can't really ding him too hard. Van Jefferson, again, like, technically when he's been given the ball, it hasn't been disastrous necessarily. He just doesn't get the football because he's not open. So, like, it doesn't really happen very much. I'll give him a C down the board just because I think the highs with Pickens bring them up from like a D or F, what they'd be without him, obviously.
Yeah, Shayne, give me an A for Pickens, give me an F for the rest of the group collectively. And so we'll meet at a C- here for the wide receivers. I think that it's been very unspectacular outside of Pickens. What you've gotten has been worse, I think, than what fans would have even expected. You obviously had the one really nice scheme out of Calvin Austin. He's given you nothing outside of that. And part of the reason it could be the passing concepts, the schemes. getting these guys open, or at least trying to utilize their skill set properly, in a combination of them just not being the players that you need in that position. Like,
Yeah.
I think honestly, Austin, I think, is at best a wide receiver 3. Van Jefferson is probably a guy that's borderline unrosterable at this point. And so it's very, very low end. You'd be hard pressed to find a receiving group. If Pickens were to go down, Shayne, it's the worst in the NFL. I mean,
if Pickens were to go down, I think they'd have no choice but to trade their entire draft for like 3 receivers that can play.
Because there would be no salvaging the season.
Yeah, that would be, or the you punt on the season. Like, that's how bad it is outside of him. It's not great right now.
It's been rough. Tight ends, more optimistic here, I would say, right?
Yeah, I'd give this a solid B. I think Freiermuth has still not been involved as much as I'd like in the passing game, but he did have a good game this past week. He does have his moments. There's been some plays that were taken away from him for penalties and such, which you could say that about multiple players in the offense, but he's been really good. And Darnell Washington, we got to find a way to get this man the football a little bit more. I mean, I understand he's not easy to get the ball to in the traditional way, but hey, if he can get lost on like a little leak out pass like that, and then just go be a 300-pound offensive lineman with tight end skills, that works for me. I mean, that play was so fun to watch, and like it's hard to watch that and go like, man, there's got to be a way to get this guy the football a little bit, right? Like, there has to be. He has a touchdown, obviously, it's really nice against the Chargers. Like, find a way to get him the football a little bit. I know he's been great as a blocker, and that's what matters most for him, but that's something you can do. Like, that's something that could be a little niche on this offense. So
I'm gonna give it the tight ends a B+, and it's because of Washington. Really, I think you should not be able to throw a pass to a 6'7", 280-pound tight end in the flat and have him pick up 20 yards.
Yeah, jump over somebody.
And so I agree. I think he needs to. We know that he's got soft, natural hands. We know that he's also a bit lumbering because of how big he is.
Yeah.
But the back shoulder fade, and now this catch,
when he gets up to speed, though, he ran a good 40, because once he does get up to speed, he's fast. It just takes him a while, because, again, 280-pound guys don't run like quickly. They take a minute to get going.
And he had a reception off like a hitch route too, where he just backed into the guy and kind of fell for another 4 yards. I'm like, he is so big,
they don't want to tackle him.
Hard to tackle. So, I would. I'm going to give that a B+ for that offensive line. Let's do it as a unit, Shayne. What would you give for the offensive line?
I mean, if we're doing it as a unit, I think they've done an admirable job overall. When you consider the injuries and the inconsistency at the right tackle spot, right? Like, I kind of feel like I got to give him like a B-, because Frazier's been unbelievable. The guard play, like, obviously Anderson was whatever. McCormick, I think, has been better. Daniels, before he got hurt, was sensational. Like, I think Dan Moore, for all his faults and all his issues, has been not a problem, at least this year, which of course it'd be this year that he's not a problem, you know, which, you know, whatever. But I think I got to give him like a B-. I think they haven't been really the problem for this team as much as they probably should be.
Yeah, Shayne, I'll go with the same grade. I think that they've been pretty good overall. They've had their moments. Obviously, Broderick's had his mental lapses, and
he's going to couple in this game too. But
I think these past few games, I think 85% of the snaps of Broderick Jones are really solid snaps. The problem is when you mix in like 5 or 6 snaps per game, that's not what makes the good offensive lineman. Like, you have to have more consistency than that. Frazier's been really good. Daniels was really good before the season-ending injury. I think that it's been a pretty strong performance overall. Even just thrusting 4th-rounder Mason McCormick into action, there's a lot to like about his game. He's obviously a very strong football player, so we'll see if he gets that opportunity the rest of the way here, what they decide to do there. But I'll go with the good B- as well. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball, and let's talk about let's go interior defenders, Shayne.
I got to give him an A, because Cam Hayward is back. He is back, like fully back. And should we be surprised? No. Do most teams, like, if they had a guy like this, would they be super surprised? Yes. But most teams don't have Cam Hayward, who plays better at 35 than most guys play at 25, right? It's just not normal. So it's hard to really again, should we be that surprised? No. Are we a little bit? Yes. Benton has been a great pass rusher. I'm still looking to have him make the jump. He just doesn't play as many snaps as like Hayward does, and still losing snaps to other guys, which I get, because like Ogunjobi has not been bad at all as a pass rusher, especially. The other guys have played well in the interior too. But him and Benton are definitely the linchpins of that group.
Yeah, Shane, I would go as far to say Cam Hayward is the best run defender in the NFL right now.
Yeah, I would. It's hard to.
I think, regardless of position, when you can two gap and you can take on two blockers and just shed effortlessly to make the plays at the line of scrimmage that he does. I mean, I'm not sure if there's a close second right now. And Dexter Lawrence, obviously, way up there.
He's great, and he's obviously a great pass rusher too. But Cam's pass rushing numbers, like the numbers. They're pretty good.
Yeah. He does look back. Good. I mean, you talk about money well spent. It's Cam Hayward. Like
that's Cam,
that contract looks amazing right now.
Give him Patrick Queen some money. Patrick Queen should give him some of his contract.
Yes, yeah. Just do a timeshare with it. So
there you go.
I think that Benton Ogunjobi been really solid so far. Not impressed with Dean Lowry, the limited usage of him and Montravius Adams, but it is what it is. I mean, you're talking bottom of the roster guys.
Yeah.
Collectively, though, as a unit, I would give this group an A. I think they've been really strong. Edge rushers, Shane, for the Steelers.
Because Highsmith is missing time and has been out, and Herbig didn't have the performance we'd love to see him have in this first game as a starter, I'm going to keep them just below an A at a B+. TG also, like, production overall wise hasn't been quite as disruptive as the numbers might, or as watching might suggest. He did have a bit of a slower game this past week. I think obviously it's still one of the strengths of the team and maybe the strength of the team when everyone's healthy. But I will say, like, overall, because of the lack of depth as well, that's a big part of the problem here, is when TJ's on and Herbig's on, like, this is an A+ pass rushing unit. When one of them isn't, it kind of falls down to more of a B+. So I'll keep him at a B+.
Okay, Shane, I'm going to give him an A- based on what we've seen over the first 4 games. And I agree with you. This was certainly their worst game collectively as a pass rush unit. You do miss Alex Highsmith. You need to have guys that can spell you of snaps so that you can take a breather. And Leal is, I mean, he's
just not a true edge. He's just
he truly isn't. But you look at what Watt did in the first 3 games, and week 1 specifically, he had 2 strip sacks called back in that game.
Yes, he did.
One was the wrong call. You can freeze frame it if you want. Sure. Watt was not offsides there. The other one was called back because of an illegal hands to the face. It really didn't impact the play. Dante Jackson got his hands up in the face of the wide receiver just very briefly. In that strip sack was also called back. And so I think that it has been a really dominant performance from Watt in the first 3 weeks. This week, not so much. Didn't have nearly the impact. Nobody did on defense, really. But collectively, I still think this unit is one of the best in the league. And I think I'm certainly not worried about it moving forward, although I think you could take a bit of a hit until Highsmith is back and healthy again.
Yeah, I think the consistency of the pass rush will be impacted by Highsmith being out. The highs of it still just as high. It's just, are you going to get the consistency? That's the biggest thing.
All right, Shane, I'm interested to see your grade on this one. Off-ball linebackers for the Steelers. What would you do here?
Yeah, this is a pretty comfortable, like, D- tier. Wilson has been okay in coverage overall. I know he's gotten beat on some, like you talked about, the whip routes and stuff. But linebackers, generally, you're probably going to lose that rep a lot of the time, especially if it's a receiver. Like, you're just probably not going to win that rep a lot of the time. I think he's shown some promise for sure. I think Landon Roberts is still a sound player when he's out there. But Patrick Queen, we talked about it, like, he's just been pretty brutal, and especially 2 of the 4 games. Like, he's going to have games where you're like, that's a starting linebacker in the league that you pay a good amount of money for. And then there's going to be games where you feel like he's being specifically targeted by the offense, right? And I think offenses that can target him are going to do so. And in those games, even if the defense can rally around themselves and kind of not have it be as much of a problem, he individually is going to look pretty bad. And that just, it's hard to kind of feel good about the group going in every week, knowing that's possible to happen.
Yeah, Shane, it has been rough. I'm going to give them a D+ for their performance so far. And the reason why I think this grade is so low to me is knowing that the interior defensive line has played well, knowing that Cam Hayward is taking on the blocks to set you up and get you free.
Despite us not having a true nose tackle, like they're still
I think the run defense on the edge has been good too, minus a couple of plays in this past game, but overall it's been really good. So these linebackers are getting free releases here and opportunities to make plays. They just haven't made nearly as many as they should. So D+ for me for the linebackers. Let's move to the secondary and talk about cornerbacks. Not exactly the start we envisioned for Joey Porter. I know early on it looked great, like the combination of Porter and Dante Jackson, and then they've had their ups and downs since then.
I'm going to keep him at like a mid-tier C. I think Jackson has outperformed my expectations and Porter's underperformed my expectations, right? And
That's
when
fair.
those are the two guys who play the most, that kind of is what matters. I think Trice, had he been able to stay healthy, would have upgraded this unit obviously a little bit. I think missing him hurts a lot. And Beanie Bishop has been a undrafted rookie slot corner. So,
Yeah.
it's not a huge problem, but it's not helping anything for sure, I wouldn't say. So I kind of have to keep him in a C, maybe like C minus, honestly.
Shayne, I'll go C plus here. I'll give him a little bit more grace just because of dealing with the injury to Trice, but dealing with a rookie cornerback play from the slot. And I think Bishop has done okay. It hasn't been not nearly as bad as it could have gone so far.
He's been fine.
But yeah, Porter's coming off the worst game of his career. I mean, that was a rough game to watch. And you go back and watch the tape a second time. Like, he had some really bad plays there, too grabby still. Dante Jackson has been a pleasant surprise, but he hasn't been perfect, obviously, either. I do think the Trice injury is bigger than anybody wants to give it credit for. I know that I've been called out for saying, oh, well, you're way too high on this 7th round player. Well, yes, he was picked in the 7th round, but I had a 2nd round grade on him. And I think that my pre-draft evaluation of this guy was correct, because when I watch him play, and again, albeit a small sample size, he does have 27 coverage snaps this year, Shayne, and they've come all over the place. They've come in the box, in the slot, out wide. 27 defensive snaps. He's given up 1 catch for 9 yards and has allowed a 22.9 passer rating. I think that Trice could have added a lot, because now in obvious passing situations, you can have him on the field as an extra defender and feel confident that he's going to be in good position. I did cut up the other game of week 2 against of Corey Trice, where he earned a 90.1 grading coverage from Pro Football Focus. The tape matches the film, I assure you. It's on my Twitter account if you want to go back and dig through the archives there and find that. Corey Trice was really good in coverage on a small sample size this year, and that's why I was a little bit irked, Shayne, using him on special teams, knowing the value he could potentially offer this team on defense. He pulls up lame on the special teams gunner play early in the game against the Chargers. And so now he's on IR and dealing with a hamstring injury. But overall, yes, I think it's been a little bit underwhelming performance from the cornerbacks based on what we'd like to see at this point. Safety is Shayne.
So weirdly enough, it is an A for me, but it's more to do with the Elliott signing than I think it does Minka. Minka's been good. He's still a good player, but I think if anything, Elliott's, and I think you actually agree with me on this based on something we'll talk about a little bit later. I think Elliott's been the best safety on the team kind of comfortably, and good for him. And it's good for the Steelers to get him on the contract they got him on.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the safety play overall has been really solid. You'd like to see more takeaways, I think, through 4 games.
Yeah, but I don't know how many opportunities they've gotten really to do that.
They have not been tested a lot. Now, there have been a couple times Minka has been fooled where, like the Denver game, where they end up doing the flea flicker pass.
Yeah, the whole team was all out of sorts for that one.
No, it's truly only been 2 plays. There was that, and then the play against, which team was it that Porter got sucked in and Minka was
Chargers, Quentin Johnson.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Yep, it was the early scorer from the Chargers game. So, and that one was debatably on Porter instead of Minka.
It was also just a good call against that cover 2 structure too. So it was like.
So, but overall, really strong performance by this safety group. I give it an A. Not only that, Shayne, but you haven't even really had to call upon your depth, and I think the Steelers have really strong safety depth.
Yeah, they
Davante Adams and Terrell Edmonds too. So, Miles Killebrew there still as well, but not really a guy you want deploying on defense. More of a special teams guy. All right, let's talk about the special teams real quick. Give me a special teams grade, and then we'll move on to the next part here.
I think it's an A. Boswell is Boswell, right? In my opinion, firmly now the best kicker in the AFC North. Take that, Ravens fans. With the way Justin Tucker's kicking the ball right now.
Yeah.
And the punter situation has not been a problem despite the injury. We're in, obviously, kick return, punt return has been fine. I think punt return especially has been really good. Kick return game has been whatever. It's kind of with the way the rules are now, like you're getting more of them, but they're still not that explosive, at least for the Steelers. So I still got to give them an A for how they've played, I think.
I agree. Boswell's been great. Calvin Austin's been a very solid return man, very comfortable with him back there, like I said. And then Corliss Waitman, if you don't hear about your backup punter, that's a good thing. It means that things are not going disastrous for you.
You're either mad at the punter or you don't know the punter's name. I feel like if you're a fan,
Yeah.
right? It's like those are the two sections of fans. Like, I don't know who the guy is, or man, I hate his face. I hope I never see him again. Like, those are the two different ways you can have opinions of a punter. So,
all things considered, really good. A for special teams for me. All right, Shane, I want to do a little fill in the blank exercise with you here. And I think maybe we'll bring this back, or you have to remind me. Let's try to bring it back each quarter. And I want to see how this kind of changes throughout the year. But I want you to fill in the blank. And the first one is Justin Fields is the blank best quarterback in the NFL right now.
So I have him in the 12th to 15th tier so far through 4 games.
Okay.
Because I think that there is a tier of quarterbacks that still are asked to do a lot more than him. So it's kind of unfair for me to say that they've necessarily been worse than him. But I think when you look at the efficiency he's played with, the timing, how much different he looks as a player compared to his Chicago days already through just 4 games, and you factor in the way he played in the last 2 games, especially where he was kind of the entire offense in both of those games, right? Like, it was kind of up to him to make everything work.
Yeah.
That's not something you used to be able to ask from Fields, and it worked, right? Where at least it was actually successful and not just disastrous most of the time. I think placing him any lower than that would be disingenuous, but placing him any higher might be giving him too much credit, right? So I kind of settled in that top half of the league, but not quite top 10-ish range right now.
Okay, Shane, that makes a lot of sense. And I meant to mention as well, for time purposes, we're not going to break down every position or every player across the league here, because we're going to try to keep this thing under 2 hours today.
Yes,
but you have to trust that Shane and I are watching these other games too.
Yes,
I am getting a really good feel for where players are. If we maybe will be able to go more in detail about this in the future, but for time restraint reasons, we'll keep it with this. Shane, I'm gonna give the cop-out answer. I'm gonna put him smack dab. Let's put him at 16.
That's fair. Again, I think it's fair.
And I think it's because he's trending in the right direction. When you break it down, there are a lot of just good quarterbacks, maybe not good quarterback play necessarily right now, but a lot of good quarterbacks out there that are doing enough to win football games. Scoring's down everywhere. It's not just the Steelers. And so scoring.
If you're not Sam Darnold, apparently you're not that good right now.
That's true. Right? That is wild.
Whatever.
I know. So I think based on performances so far, boy, if you could tell me I could have the 16th best quarterback quarter of the way through the season, I would have signed up for that all day, because it's been so bad recently. And I don't think that Russell Wilson would have given you this. I think you're talking about a quarterback in the 20s somewhere had it been Wilson that was playing all this time. So
yeah, I agree.
That's where I've got him right now. And I'm hoping that that'll even improve the next time we talk about this. George Pickens is the blank best wide receiver in the NFL right now.
I have him with the exact same range as Justin Fields, 12th to 15th in the league. I think that he's one of the top half of the league receiver ones right now, right? I think the problem with him ultimately is if he wants to climb higher than that, which I think his talent is capable of, got to stop doing the weird, dumb stuff sometimes, man. You just have to, right? He also sometimes, like, I know he's a weird route runner. Like, he's not polished. He's very kind of fluid with it. It works really well all the time, but sometimes you watch the film and you're like, man, you don't look like you're even attempting to catch the football. Like, it doesn't look like there's any chance you're getting the football right now. Sometimes he still gets it, which are like, all right, I don't know what to do with that as someone who watches every other receiver, and it's like no one else plays like you. But it's still hard to ignore the production and the talent. So I think you have to place him somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Shane. And I'm going to give an arbitrary number 13. Let's call him the 13th best receiver in the league through, again, that's a really good football player. There's a lot of teams that don't have number 1 receivers. The Steelers have a number 1 receiver.
We at least have that.
And I'm encouraged by Pickens. If he could be a better route runner, I mean, the sky is the limit, truly. If he could sell his routes a little bit better, because that's the kind of stuff that the All-22 shows when you put that on and see that, some of these routes are rounded off and you're not creating a ton of separation at the top of your routes. And maybe that's something that's just going to have to live with at this point. I do think he's got the athleticism to do it.
Yes.
But does he have the drive and the ability to be able to learn how to sell his routes that way. I don't know. I mean, maybe he needs to get with a good coach or something.
Maybe
I
he
like
could
what the Steelers
benefit
have done so
from
far.
playing with Davante Adams. Maybe maybe that would be great.
Yeah, maybe that would be the perfect mentor right
There
there.
you go. Yeah, maybe.
So let's call him the 13th best right now, with the opportunity to go higher than that, even in a era with a lot of good wide receivers right now. TJ Watt, Shayne, is the blank best edge rusher in the NFL.
Ooh, well, I have him currently third this season specifically. I think Hutchinson has been unbelievable for the Lions to the point it almost doesn't make sense. You look at the numbers, and again, some of these numbers are pulled from PFF, so take that what you will. But he's on pace right now in their system. So using their background of how they grade players and how they count stats, he is on pace for 170 pressures, which, if you didn't know, is way more than anyone ever has recorded for them. It's not even close to that number. I think the highest is about 110 or so, and he had 100 last year, right? Like, he just consistently for that team is pretty much their entire pass rush, right? So you have to give him the nod right now. Is the best player at the position. And then I think, as much as I hate to say it, I think Nick Bosa has been phenomenal this year for the Niners, because they also haven't had much help around him. Like, Hargrave has gone down. The second edge rush position has been kind of a mess. They've needed him to play really well. And he's been a great run defender too. I think TJ and him are right in the same tier of unbelievable pass rushers with great run defense as well. I think that just Bosa has been a little bit more productive on the field. And part of that is because of the way that they're played. But I think if you're grading them out right now and looking at them individually, I would have Watt as third.
Yeah, Shayne, through a quarter of the way through the season, man, there can be so much discussion about this. There's so many good. It's such an historic era for edge rushers in the NFL right now. I think third is fair. I'll say, man, I'm stuck between third and fourth. I'll say fourth for now, and I'll give myself room to go up a little bit here. But I think that for the same reasons, Aiden Hutchinson has been the best, in my opinion, in the league.
He's off to a hot start. Like,
Nick Bosa is looking like a borderline DPOY candidate again, with how good he's been, just consistent overall. And I hate to say it, I mean, Myles Garrett, still creates a lot of pressure on the quarterback, a lot of disruptive.
I dinged him a little bit because the run defense has not been great from him.
Sure.
And when you're factoring in everything, because if you told me pass rushers, maybe you swap those guys, right?
I'll say, and the reason I say fourth, not even necessarily Garrett, but I think between one of Garrett, a healthy Micah Parsons, a Max Crosby, you could make a case. And Crosby and Parsons they haven't played as dominant as they did last year. But it's just such a good era in the NFL in general. Edge rushers right now.
And again, it's a razor thin margin for me with from second through 10th. There's not a lot separating these guys. It's really Hutchinson's the only guy who's separated himself this season overall. So
and I would say from 2 to 6 or 7, you could definitely argue those guys are they're all in the same tier, and you can kind of order them any which way, at least this season. So we'll see how that one shapes out. Let's move to more general topics here, Shayne. Steelers have the blank best offense in the NFL right now.
I have them settling right around 20th. They're 22nd in scoring right now. They're 17th in yards right now. So it feels right to be about 20th. But I think, actually, believe it or not, I think that's kind of their floor, assuming they don't have any more major injuries. I think they're climbing right now, right? Obviously, this past game, it was necessary to get more yards and points because you had to try to come back. But I think they proved that they can play offense in a way that they haven't been asked to. And I just hope, and I know it's wishful thinking, but even Fields, I think he talked about, they have to start playing like they did in the second half right from the get-go. They have to be willing to attack right from the get-go. And if they don't do that, then you're probably going to stay around this 20th rank. But I think they have room to climb up into the mid-tier or maybe even a little bit higher throughout the year.
Yeah, Shayne, I think that's completely fair there. I'm going to call them 19th. Just to one up you a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because I think that 20 is a good number, but I think that they've done everything that you wanted to see, at least in terms of trending in the right direction. I think they've got the quarterback with the upside and explosive ability to make things happen. And look, if you've got, even if this offense is even average by the end of the year, if it becomes the 16th best offense and you've got a top 5 defense, assuming they do by that point, you'll have a chance. You'll give yourself a chance at least, especially in a historically low scoring season. So let's call them 19th for now with room to improve. Steelers have the blank best defense in the NFL.
I have them as the second best defense. Now, I know this last week was rough, but they were historically good through 3 games. And I think that against most opponents, especially once they start getting some pieces back, they're going to be able to really keep a lot of teams below that 20-point mark consistently, which in the NFL, even with scoring down, is just not easy to do consistently. I think they're one of the defenses that can do that. Now, the defense I have ahead of them right now, a lot of it is scheme, I will say. It's not necessarily talent at all, but you have to give Brian Flores and the Vikings so much credit. I know they let the Packers get into that game, back into that game last week, but it was a lot of like garbage time stuff that ultimately ended up meaning a little bit more than they should have realistically. But that defense is so well coached, so well schemed up. The pass rushers are getting home. The coverage players are playing above their heads. Like, you have to, in my opinion, kind of give it up to them until they start to fall off, if they ever do.
Yeah, I think that's fair for sure. And there's several teams that you could argue here at the top of the league.
Yeah.
And it's interestingly, there's some that don't have nearly the star power that the Steelers do, but are still performing really well. I mean, I think the Chiefs defense has been great again this year.
Denver has been unbelievable.
Denver's has been really good. I mean, they just held Aaron Rodgers and the Jets to 9 points. And so I'll put Steelers at 3. And I kind of think that my guess is this is where they'll end up kind of leveling out somewhere in this area.
Probably.
But I wouldn't be shocked if they end up having the league's best defense this year. I just think that the schedule gets tougher. We'll see how things do down the stretch here. But yeah, let's put them at 3 for now. Shayne, the Steelers are the blank best team entering the second quarter of the season.
So I have them 12th right now. I think a top 20-ish or better offense and a top 3 defense gets you into that around 12th team ranking, right? And I think they specifically are firmly a playoff contender team. And I think whether they fall closer to playoff fringe or actual like championship contender is based on, 1, can they get healthy sooner rather than later, and 2, are they going to make a move for an Adams or someone like that, right? I think those things are the most like impactful swings that they could take in the next few weeks and into the rest of the season. But right now I have them firmly in that top 14 group, and specifically 12th, like I said.
Okay, Shayne, I want to go the same as you. I really want to go 12. I think that's that fair spot right there where I'm not overrating what they've done so far this season, but at the same time, seeing how the scoring is down, seeing that Steelers defense has been really good outside of their performance, at least really their first half performance against the Colts. They've been a really good defense. Outside of that, I think that overall, collectively, they've got talent around the roster, even with their injuries. So I'm going to put them at 12 for now. And hopefully the next time we talk about this, it can go up from there even. All right, Shayne, next thing I want to do, and before we get into our Cowboys-Steelers game preview, is I want to ask you, give me a couple hot takes that you have about the Steelers early in the season after this first quarter.
So whenever I saw this, I was like, what kind of hot takes can I come up with here? Because usually I'm not that type of analyst at all. I usually try to stay away from that, mostly because, again, like, I think you're kind of playing with fire, ironically, a little bit too often. But I have a couple that I think are definitely interesting, and I think would be hot for a lot of fans, especially, maybe not some analysts. But the first one I have, Fields will be the opening week starter in 2026. I think he will still be the first. Okay. I think that he is resigned following the season, and I think it's at least a 2-3 year deal where he plays it out, and we kind of go from there. And I think he will still be the starter in week 1 of 2026. That's the first one I have.
Wow, I like it. If he keeps playing the way he does and projecting the way that he's going towards, that would be something that would be interesting for sure. My first one, Shayne, is that the quarterback competition is done, regardless of whether Tomlin comes out and says it or not, which he hasn't been, and we expect nothing less from Tomlin. Shayne, there are still fans.
I know,
on Twitter,
it's just really frustrating.
I don't get. I mean, I don't think that they've really watched Russell Wilson these past 3 years. Like, this guy, and that was Russell Wilson without dealing with a calf injury that he's had all summer long, just all this time with the first team offense.
Yeah.
I don't know how or why you would want to go from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson right now. I know the Steelers lost a game. They are 3-1. Fields is playing some of the best football of his career. He's creating something out of nothing, like routinely. I think the competition is over, and I think that Tomlin is just kind of afraid to come out and say it right now, or he's trying to do his veteran quarterback on the bench, due diligence by just not revealing that yet. And maybe he will shortly. At some point, Shayne, you have to imagine it's going to be soon. Wilson's going to start logging full practices instead of these partial practices where he can't go all the time. And once he does, you'd have to assume the Steelers are going to make him the QB2. Now, you can't make him the QB2 unless you say, yeah, we've decided that we like Fields. We like what we're getting out of him, and he's our starter. So some point he's going to have to declare it. I kind of wish that he would, just to give Fields that boost of confidence, and not so that Fields doesn't have to walk on eggshells the whole time. Like, oh, if I make a mistake, I'm worried that Tomlin's going to eventually go back to Russell Wilson. Like, you have to not have that in the back of your mind at some point in the season.
Yeah, I will say I think that that's by design a little bit, though, because I think he does want him to walk on eggshells a little bit.
You want to push him. I get
unfortunately,
but at the same time, it's like you also want your quarterback to play with like
confidence,
high level of confidence all the time. So
but I think he still has for the most part, but it is interesting to think about, like, is that impacting him?
I think so too.
Somewhat. Yeah.
And so I think the competition is secretly done already. Shayne, do you have another
I do. So the next one I have here, and I think that you'll at least agree with part of this. I think based on how things are going so far, now we'll see when he gets back, specifically Warren, but I think Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren are both on new teams in 2025 potentially.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of that is, and we don't do, we will do draft stuff eventually, but not currently really. This running back class is loaded.
Yeah,
I mean, talking about first round level players, second round, like every round of the draft, there's guys who are like, man, I'd love to have that guy with X, round pick. Yeah, I think that this would be the year to reset the position. Look for somebody who specifically Arthur Smith wants to run the football in his scheme, and kind of take it in a different direction, because neither player is a true perfect fit. I do think Warren's a better fit for it, but he's still not exactly what Smith has usually worked with. I think that it would make sense to try to maybe do that, because one, you can be cheaper at running back with a draft pick, even with a higher draft pick, and you can kind of get some youth and inject some explosiveness that Warren does have at times, but he was an older rookie. He is an undrafted player. Like, do you want to pay him millions of dollars to maybe sometimes miss time? Like, it's lining up where that could be very possible.
Shayne, I think it's good philosophy. I question whether or not the Steelers would do it, but that's what makes it a hot take. Yes. I do think it's really interesting, though, and it'd be something that I would be interested in doing, is hitting the reset button there with a good draft class. Warren has not shown the ability to stay healthy consistently or carry the load by himself. And then Najee's kind of just been unspectacular over 4 years. Not bad, but unspectacular, where you can replace that 3.9 yards a carry and low explosive play rate with most other guys in the league. And so it makes sense to me for sure. My second one, Shayne, you might not like this, and I hate to be so hard on this guy.
Yeah.
But I think that Najee is the third best running back on the Steelers. Not the second. I think he's the third best running back on the Steelers. I think if you were to give, and I went back and watched this again, Shayne, and I know that this might contradict some of your thoughts that you had, but even though the running room was limited against the Colts, he just takes so long to get going and doesn't have that burst, that second gear. He can't get skinny through those holes, because when you're 6'2" and 242 pounds, like, it's just not how you win. You need to get a hole, and you need to be able to do something with it. And unfortunately, he's not Derrick Henry when you get him in space. Like, he's still Najee when he's past the line of scrimmage and out in the open field. There's so much of his game that is just, I don't even want to use, I use the word plotting. I think Najee can be very plotting at times until you get him out in space. Then he's running people over. He's not doing it with speed, but he's running you over. So I think that a healthy Jaylen Warren and a healthy Cordarrelle Patterson, I would play them both over Najee Harris. That's just my 4 years into this now of seeing Najee. That's my opinion on it.
So I will say, I think he is the third most explosive player at running back, which in the case of, I know what matters to a lot of people, would make him the third best back. I think the problem is this, again, just was not probably going to be a great scheme fit for him. I think if you sent him to a power running team that does open up holes that are meant to be like a power run scheme, where you're getting your shoulder square and running through people, he'd be much more effective than he has been with us, especially now that he showed a lot of that last year, where he was getting better with those types of things. Now you put him in this offense, it's not really built for him, obviously. And again, like I don't
Mhm.
disagree with the philosophy running the football that we have. It's just that we don't really have the players healthy to do it right now, right?
Yeah.
Because that would be Warren and Patterson. So he's probably he's definitely the third best back for this system. I think that if you put each of these guys in their absolute ideal offense, he might be
Mhm.
better than like a Patterson, obviously, probably because of the
Yeah.
age situation. But on this team, he's definitely the third most effective back through 3 games, especially if Warren was healthy. I think he'd be more effective too.
Okay, that's fair. What else you got for me, Shane? Any more hot takes here?
Yeah, so I think we both have 4. So
Okay.
my next one here, and this might not be that hot of a take, but it's more so just like, man, are they really going to have to do this again? Is this what they're going to do again? Steelers draft an offensive tackle within the first 2 rounds of 2025 draft.
Oh wow.
I think that they're going to have to
Yeah.
do that. Like if Jones doesn't, I know he's been a little bit better now that he's played a little bit more. If Jones doesn't show market improvement through the rest of the
Mhm.
year, Dan Moore's not getting re-signed. I hope not, at least. I mean, holy crap. So hopefully that's not in consideration. And then Fatanu, like obviously I like him. I'm definitely not giving up on him. It's just injury is what his problem is. But you need to have 2 tackles who you're comfortable with, and I don't think they're going to have 2 tackles they're comfortable with starting next year. So do they take
Mhm.
another swing at somebody to compete with Jones or to have in case Fatanu can't stay healthy or whatever? Like I think they're probably going to have to go to the well again.
Yeah, that is interesting because I can see a world where they re-sign Dan Moore, and I know that
I
would
hate
kill
that,
you.
but you're right. Yeah,
But
again, if
he's
he's playing better, then like I
yes,
guess I get
and
it. But
again, this is
yeah,
I think Dan Moore's a great guy, but I resent him for finally playing football in his 4th season
at a
after the
decent
Steelers spent
level.
2
Yeah,
first-round picks on tackles. Now, fortunately, he is playing good football with Fautano injured. You'd hate to play
yeah,
Dan Moore, be forced into playing Dan Moore if he was
and
playing
he's bad.
poorly.
Yeah, he's bad. Yeah,
So, but yeah, I can see a world. I really can where
yeah,
that
I can
happens because
too.
they'll just have so much more trust in him. They won't trust
Yeah.
Fautano to stay healthy because of the knee. They won't trust Broderick unless he starts improving by leaps and bounds and shows that he doesn't have all these mental lapses. So,
Right.
but my next one, Shane, my next hot take is I think that Darnell Washington is more valuable today than Pat Freiermuth. He's just a more valuable player. When you can act as a third offensive tackle, when you are dominant as a pass blocker and a run blocker, and when I can still get you the ball in a drag and you can take it for 20 yards. I know he's not going to do that all the time, but I can throw a fade past you in the end zone.
Mhm.
Like the passing game stuff, it's been limited usage. Freiermuth is obviously going to be the better and more used wide receiving option. But I think because Freiermuth is a bad blocker, and he truly is, like that's
He's
just
not.
not his forte at all.
It's not.
He's not an elite athlete. He doesn't create a ton of space, though I think he is a consistent. He's got soft, natural hands. He can do some good things in the receiving game. Darnell is just a harder player to find. And he's more valuable to the team.
I think that I don't know if this is really that hot of a take at this point, but especially like he should be more valuable. The
Mm-hmm.
thing is, I think that because the running game has not been very good, it makes it
Yeah.
less of a bonus because they're not still able to get it going. But it's not his fault at
Mm-hmm.
all. But I
No,
do
it's not.
think that I do think that that's the one thing, the caveat to that of like he should be way more valuable. But because the running game hasn't fully gotten going, it kind of limits his value as much because if he's doing his job but no one else is sometimes, it kind of makes it a moot point.
Mm.
But in general, like for this type of offense, especially, he definitely should be the more valuable player, and I think he can be if he isn't already. So
Okay, I agree. And Shane, the Steelers could save a first or second round pick. They got a tight end that could do that.
yeah,
Do that
might as well
role.
just play him
And
at tackle. Why not? You know, if you
he
need
is.
to.
I don't know if I've ever been as impressed with a tight end in pass protection before.
Yeah,
Like
it's
he's just
insane. It
so
really
good at
doesn't
it.
make sense to watch. It
The
looks
anchoring
crazy.
strength, like you watch him a couple reps against like Matt Judon and some of the guys he's gone against, stalls him out
Yeah,
instantly. Like, he is strong
it's
player. So he's
yeah,
fun to watch.
it's fine.
Shane, what is your last hot take before we move
My
on?
my last one, and this is probably going to put a damper on Steelers fans as far as their trade acquisition potential this year, but I do believe the Steelers are going to either trade for or pay for a legitimate wide receiver 2, if not 1,
Mhm.
but not till next offseason. I think it's going to
Okay.
be a next offseason thing. I think they're going to ride it out this year mostly with what they have, maybe make a small addition to kind of help settle things down. But I think they're going to like what they see in Fields the rest of the season. I think they're going to go
Mhm.
with him in the future, but they're going to try to upgrade the receiving core around him with Pickens and someone else. But it won't be till this next offseason.
Okay. And I know that would disappoint a lot of fans if they miss out before the trade deadline. Again, this year, guys are moving around. Teams that are out of the running aren't willing to part with the receiver, or they go to teams that Steelers fans are being like, that could have been us. So yeah, I can see that.
Probably.
And my last hot take, Shayne, and you touched on this one already a little bit. I think Deshaun Elliott is playing better than Minka. This isn't a knock on Fitzpatrick. I still think that he's one of the best safeties in the league, but the takeaway drought has been so long. And how much value, do you have if you are a safety that doesn't take the ball away? And it's not his fault because you're not targeting him often. Just a few maybe missed opportunities is all that you can count them on one hand this season for Minka, maybe. But I just think that it's a combination of Elliott playing so well and Minka playing solid football, just not having the same level of impact because Elliott's the one that had the interception in week 1. He's the guy that is making things happen. Like he's all over in run defense. Like he's crashing down there and doing the stuff that Patrick Queen should be doing. Like he's been really, really impressive. It reflects in his grades. It reflects on the All-22 for what it's worth. He's the 3rd highest graded safety in the entire NFL right now. Minka is 11th. I think that it pretty much lines up with what you see on film. He's just been the more impactful player overall. And I think Minka does a lot more of the unsaid stuff, the stuff that goes unrecognized because he is a threat that you want to avoid. But Elliott's made the bigger impact so far.
Yeah, and I think the reason why this, as much as it is kind of a hot take, but it also just reflects on the film through 4 games. The reason why this is great, though, is because it's not like Minka's been bad, like you said. If you would have told me before the season, the first 4 games, Minka would have been clearly the 2nd best safety on the team, and Elliott was the first, I would have been like, what happened to Minka? Like, is he hurt? Has he been giving up touchdowns? Like, what's going on? No, it's just that Elliott has been truly, truly impactful in multiple facets of the game. And when you get a guy for $6 million over 2 years is what his contract is. I mean, talk about a steal. It does make up a lot for the Patrick Queen thing because you're paying $16 million a year for those 2, which sounds a lot better than $13 million for Queen and $3 million for Elliott. It's kind of like when teams draft a bad player in the first round, a good player in the second round. It's like, you still kind of drafted okay then. It kind of works.
You just got to flip the order in your head, and it makes more sense.
So but in general, it's really been awesome to watch, and I think that you're correct to say that he's been the more impactful, especially safety through 4 games.
All right, Shayne, we are $1:30 into this thing right now. We're going for, I don't know why we keep trying to break our new record.
There's a lot to talk about for once. Normally it's the Steelers lost because of X reason, or they won because of X reason. Let's move on to next. Usually that's what it is. So
a lot fewer rants I've noticed this year than early season last year as well.
Yeah, so a little bit,
So let's talk about Steelers Cowboys Week 5 preview. They play on Sunday Night Football. You wouldn't expect anything less for even an out of conference rivalry like the Steelers and Cowboys, these storied franchises. So opening odds, Shayne, Steelers are 2.5-point favorites. The line shifted a lot when Micah got hurt, and that's a big loss for the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to talk about the injuries here, but do you think that this line is fair, just knowing what we know about this heading into several days ahead of the game right now?
I think it's very fair because, again, the Cowboys are hurting. We're hurting, but they are hurting. Both their edge rushers out for this game. Lawrence on IR, I believe, and Parsons going to miss at least a couple games, most likely. Brandon Cooks apparently has an infection in his knee. He won't be playing in this game. So it's basically CeeDee Lamb versus the world, which, there's one of the few receivers where that might be okay, but it's still not great if you're the Cowboys. Dak has been up and down. The running game doesn't exist most of the time. Offensive line has had major issues. Now you're going up against a pass rush that has the speed that we have at edge rusher. It's a bad matchup for the Cowboys. It just is. It's really hard not to feel that way. So, and you have to come to Pittsburgh. It's a really bad matchup for a team that barely scraped by the Giants, and it's not looking good for Cowboys right now.
Yeah, Shayne, let's move on and talk about some of those injuries. So Micah Parsons got rolled up on. Obviously, Mike he's a hard player to take out of the game. You can line him up anywhere. He's so fast, can generate quick pressure as well as any player in the league. And so he has a high ankle sprain. He's not going to be ready this week, although he's not been officially ruled out as we have this podcast
I can't
today.
Imagine he's going to play.
He was seen in a knee cart and a foot brace. And so I just can't imagine there's any way you go from that to like
Yeah.
Paul Pierce at halftime on one of those games where he's like in a wheelchair. And he
Right.
springs up.
I don't think Micah just had to run to the bathroom though, like Pierce did. I don't think. I think
he was visibly limping, like you could see it. So I mean, he's not going this week. I would be really, really surprised. He's probably going to stay out for a couple of weeks, and the Cowboys won't want a chance or suffering a setback there. So big loss for them. But it's not just him, as you talked about, is DeMarcus Lawrence, the other edge rusher, who is, I think, one of the best edge twos in the NFL because he's such a good run
defender.
Always underrated every year. You always get for some reason, Shayne, when you were a great run defender, you get overlooked. He's not the pass rusher that a lot of these guys are, but this is a big loss for them because he's one of the only players on Cowboys defensive line that can stop the run. And so
which is not good.
He's trending towards IR. Deron Bland still not ready to come back, who was an all-pro corner, arguably the best corner in football last year with his amazing season. Not ready to come back from the foot injury yet, and so they're going to be without him. And then you said Brandon Cooks, like he had his knee ended up getting an infection after surgery, it looked like, and so he's gonna miss this game at least.
Right.
So I mean, that's a lot of big losses for Cowboys, and I think when you compare them to the losses the Steelers have, which is Alex Highsmith is going to miss another week. Maybe one of Jalen Warren or Cordarrelle Patterson, potentially both out this week. We'll have to wait and see how the injury report unfolds, obviously. And then Fauatano out for the season, Nate Herbig out for the season, and now James Daniels out for the season. That's more players, and it's a high percentage of starting players in your offense, not to mention Roman Wilson hasn't played yet. But Cowboys losses are more impactful than what the Steelers are, because when you're losing legitimately 3 of your best 5 or 6 players on your team, that hurts. I mean, that would be the equivalent of Steelers being without TJ Watt and
Cam Hayward, probably.
You take those guys away, it looks like a totally different defense. And I hope that it does against the Steelers this week. You gotta reap the benefits of other teams' misery sometimes. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's talk about some of these matchups to watch now, Shayne. Initially, I was going to spend a lot of time talking about Micah against Broderick Jones, because that one had the potential to kind of go the wrong way for us there. And I can see the Steelers sending help there. Now you're not going to have to. I mean, Carl Lawson and KJ Henry, who are they? I
don't even know.
They're picking the guys up off the street at this point. And so usually I do like to, every game I like to highlight edge versus O-line, because it makes such a big impact on the game. But you're not going to have those matchups you're going to have to worry about. Even DeMarcus Lawrence initially, like going against like a Dan Moore, like that's one where you get like a savvy vet that can long arm you and push you back into the pocket against Moore, who's again had a solid start to this season, but we know that he's been exploited by good edge rushers at times. Don't have to worry about that one either, Shayne. And so that suddenly becomes a moot point here. Is there any matchups on the offensive line that you're interested to see? Kind of Cowboys are depleted. They don't have run stoppers. And so theoretically, you would hope that, and it's a reason why I want Mason McCormick in there this week at guard, even if Siamalu comes back. If you get Siamalu, hopefully we'll see what he's like when he's coming back, but Siamalu, Zach Frazier, and McCormick bullying a beat up defensive line that's bad at stopping the run, I think you can gash some holes there.
Yeah, I think the key thing for them is like the interior of their defensive line with the Cowboys. Like Mozzie Smith has been horrendous. I will say that. Like, so I'm not really worried about him. But Osa Odighizuwa could be a potential issue as a pass rusher, at least. Now, he's not going to do anything as a run defender, I don't think. It's not really his thing. But I don't want to see quick pressure up the middle. He hasn't been anything special, but he is at least a better pass rusher than a lot of guys that they're going to face this year, just because he's smaller, quicker, that type of player. Might be an issue for our more power guards that we're going to be putting out there right now. Frazier obviously is going to be able to help with that a little bit too. I'm sure they're going to be doubling with him a lot on him, but as long as they can kind of keep him in check, I don't know who you're worried about. Like Marshawn Nealon was a guy I liked coming out of Western Michigan, I think it was, and he's probably going to have to play a lot. And he's a bigger body power guy, so that might give a guy like Moore some issues at times just because he's not the strongest player. But he's not going to win the corner on you very much. He's not going to be one of those guys. You could probably deal with him. Again, like it's just a whole different Cowboys front to deal with right now than you normally would have to. Much more in the favor of the Steelers in this case.
Yeah, and I'll give Mozzie a little bit of credit. He's had some really nice plays, but for the most part, he's struggled. He's gotten tossed to the side at times as a run defender for Dallas. I think that the biggest one here, Shayne, the biggest matchup how do the Steelers contain CeeDee Lamb? This is a
Yes.
one-man wrecking crew offense because everything funnels through him. You're talking
Yeah.
about the NFL's leading receiver from last year. I know that CD hasn't been the same player through the first quarter of the season, but this guy can destroy you at any point. So obviously the Steelers' top cornerback is Joey Porter. Are you going to trust putting Joey Porter in the slot, a position he's not really comfortable defending from? It's not really his forte. He doesn't have the quick twitch ability if for CD to snap out one direction or the other. Like, how do you play this? And I'm telling you, zone is probably not the way to go either. Dak is so stinking good against zone coverages, but you are going to want to devote almost all of your attention to CD, especially with Brandon Cooks out. I know they got Jalen Tolbert on the other side. I'm perfectly fine leaving Dante Jackson one-on-one with Jalen Tolbert. I'll take my chances there. Yeah. I'm not going to let CeeDee Lamb kill me in this game. I can see him going off for 11 catches and 1,200 or 120, 1,200. Let's hope not. 120 yards and a touchdown. And that would be enough to wreck the game potentially for Steelers pass defense. So how can Joey Porter defend him? I don't love this matchup because CD plays from the slot so often. The Cowboys love to get those matchups and exploit them. So that one worries me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if I was the Steelers now, they're not going to do this because they'd be more likely to ask Patrick Queen to cover him than do what I'm about to say. Mm-hmm. But I would legitimately tell the defense, like, okay, so Joey's going to shadow him. We're going to have either safety or other corner, whether it's Bishop or someone else, bracketing with him. Staying close to where he's lined up at as well. And then the linebackers, I'd be telling them, as soon as you see 2 8s in front of you, go and destroy him. I don't care if even if you get a penalty sometimes, go make him feel like he's getting crashed down on every time the ball is coming his way. Like, that would be my strategy. Are they going to do that? No, they're not going to do that because that's not what the Steelers do. But that's what they should do. I think what they are going to do is probably have Joey be on him a lot because they expect him to be the guy that can do that. And I think he can theoretically do it, but like we've seen recently, he's not playing his best football right now. So it's going to probably be shaky at times. They just have to, at least if they're not going to slow down Lamb consistently, they can't let anyone else beat them then. You cannot let a random 50-yard Jalen Tolbert pass. You can't let the tight ends get loose like they did against the Colts late in that game. Like, you can't do that. So if they're going to let Lamb eat a little bit, you can live with that as long as no one else is making plays too. So you get those third long situations occasionally where you can't get him the football. So.
Yeah, I agree, Shayne. That needs to be priority number 1, 2, and 3. Stop CeeDee Lamb. Don't let Dak get comfortable with that. They've got maybe the best rapport together of all the quarterback wide receiver combinations in football right now. So they can't let them start cooking. I'm perfectly fine with not devoting as much to the run. Obviously, you can't get run all over, but with Zeke Elliott and Rico Dowdle, like that, they just don't scare me at all, especially with the way that Hayward and Benton and those guys are playing on the inside. But other than CD, the other one that scares me a little bit is Jake Ferguson getting down the seam.
Yeah, just because we don't play the tight end
with the linebacker play and everything that's transpired with the Steelers so far, and knowing that he has the ability to do that one's a little bit scary as well. Defensively, Shayne, I look at Steelers' edge against Cowboys offensive tackles. I like the matchup of TJ Watt against Terrence Steele, although if Dallas has been watching film like they should be, you know that you can just devote your attention over there because it's what every team does, and the Steelers do not flip sides with their edge players. They did very briefly. I think the Watt got a snap or two on the right side in the last game just to see. But yeah, you're going to know where Watt is at all times. He's going to be lined up in that wide 9. They're going to chip him with a running back or a tight end. I fully expect it to happen. Having said that, I still think that Watt will get the best of Terrence Steele on a handful of reps, and 1 or 2 of them could be those game-changing type plays.
Yeah, I think this is a big Nick Herbig game. It's got to be, because if it isn't, I know that Watt will get his occasionally because Dak's going to have to drop back and throw the football a lot in this game probably if they want to win. But again, they're going to be committing resources to him. I think Zeke's one of the best pass protectors at running back now that he's gotten older and much more efficient in that regard. So he might not be a threat as a runner very often, but he's probably going to be a screen threat. He's going to be a passing threat. He's going to be a pass blocking threat for them too. Herbig has to get around Guyton. Now, he's a rookie tackle for them, Tyler Guyton. He has not been very good, as rookie tackles tend not to be. He's got to win that matchup most times, in my opinion. If he can do that, because he's the type of pressure that Dak most struggles with, because if you get quick pressure on Dak when he's still trying to read the field, that's when you can get the quick sacks and get him down because he's a tough guy to tackle. But
Yeah.
you get him, off that blind side, you can get a couple turnovers, maybe 2 on some sack fumbles, that type of thing. That's the biggest matchup to me because we know that TJ is going to get thrown everything at him.
And Shayne, that is one of the most interesting matchups, probably other than seeing how Porter does again. And I would assume that it's a plan. Play Porter against one of the league's best receivers. I think that watching Nick Herbig go against Tyler Guyton is so interesting because you've got two polar opposite type players. Like Herbig, 6'2" on the dot, one of the quickest and bendiest edge rushers in the league. How is he going to do against a 6'7" and change, 330-pound offensive tackle? Like, I think there'll be times where Guyton maybe just buries him into the ground, and there'll be times where Guyton doesn't touch him because he gets such a good burst and dip around that edge. So how that matchup goes could kind of dictate how much time Dak's going to have to throw the football, how Dallas does in the running game. Like there's a lot of things going on with that one for sure. Any other matchups that you wanted to highlight, Shane, before we do our game prediction here?
Not specifically. I think again, like Cowboys are just so depleted, and they've had so many issues in the, like you could say the run defense versus the run game for the Steelers. But again, our running game is not looking so hot either, so that might be kind of a stalemate. Like it's kind of whatever. I think it's really about the pass defenses for both these teams, the pass rushes, and with the way that the Cowboys pass rush looks right now with all the injuries, got to give the edge to the Steelers there.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, George Pickens, a lot of times he does line up at left wide receiver. The Cowboys have Trayvon Diggs. Obviously, you need to account for. He's got tremendous ball skills, but he's probably not going to follow. Dallas plays a lot of zone.
Yeah.
He'll probably be on that side most of the time. So if you're being wise, Steelers, go target the other side. Kalen Carson's banged up. Dallas doesn't. Deron Bland's out this game, and so I would try to get him in favorable matchups, especially if the Cowboys aren't willing to get Diggs uncomfortable and have him switch sides over there. They play a lot of cover 4, and they'll play cover 2, and so they'll make sure that they're not going to get beat deep. They'll let you dink and dunk underneath, and kind of like Daniel Jones did.
Yeah, and Fields has shown he's willing to do that this year. So.
Yeah, and if you're willing to take what the defenses give you, then you just got to be good in the red zone, and you'll be fine. Otherwise, those big plays may not come, especially if Dallas ends up playing a lot of cover 4, cover 2. Just try to contain Pickens, which is a wise idea. You don't want Pickens to kill you down the field. So that's the only other one there. Shane, let's talk about our game predictions, and then we will sign off for this long episode of the Steel Curtain podcast. What do you have transpiring here on Sunday Night Football? Steelers against Cowboys. These teams play each other once every 4 years. Last time, Shane, I got to mention, it was Garrett Gilbert the Steelers got to play against. So they've not had to face Dak
in a while.
Did it go back to 20?
It was the game that Elliott blew them up whenever Ben threw.
Yeah, you're right.
Remember the fake
Shazier was still there.
The fake spike for a touchdown they threw, and then Elliott beat us still on the long run for a touchdown. That was the only time we played Dak, though. Yeah,
that is the only time. It's wild though that two storied franchises like this, they only play each other as often as they do, just once every 4-year thing. So looking forward to this game. Shane, give us a score prediction.
So I have the Steelers winning 27-21. I think the Cowboys offense will get some stuff to work. But I think their defense is just too depleted. I think the Steelers offense will get what they want, like be able to do what they want to do for the most part. And Cowboys make a late rally to make it look a little bit better. But I think the Steelers have the pronounced edge in this game because of the injuries in particular.
Okay, Shane, you're not going to like this, but Mike Tomlin's kryptonite is going against good, accurate, wise quarterbacks. And I think that Mike McCarthy is still a good enough play caller that he can exploit this team. I really worry about this matchup because Dak can be such a good quarterback. I know that he's been up and down this season, and I think that CD has the potential to kill them as well. He's going to be the best receiver that this team has gone against so far as well. I have the Steelers losing 20-23.
I think
and I really hope they score more points than that. But I also think it's going to be really hard for Dallas to stay under the 20 mark with the just the quarterback wide receiver combination that they have, even with missing Brandon Cooks. I think that they will be able to get to 20 plus. And I'm just not convinced yet, with Steelers averaging 18 points a game, that they're going to have enough consistency at this stage of the season to get there. I hope that I'm wrong. I just kind of feel like it's kind of a gut feeling here. I think it's going to be one of those types of games. I've got the Steelers losing a field goal type game on Sunday Night Football. All right. If you guys have your game predictions, please drop them in the chat here down on YouTube, or better yet, leave a comment here on YouTube. We'd like to see what your predictions are, see who can come the closest here. We go live on this show every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. And occasionally we're pushing 2-hour shows. So if you hate these, let us know. If you like them, let us know. We'd like to hear your thoughts, what you think about these long shows like this. But we love talking about football. We could do it all day long. It's what we do all day long. And so we appreciate all of you guys following along with us here. Josh Yorish does a show on 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on Monday. So check out his show. He had Derek Bell on his show on Monday. Go listen to them over there. And thank you again for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube, or ask Alexa to listen to to play the Still Curtain podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.